They tried to patrol my property with flashlights and attitude. They said I needed permission to sit on my own porch. That was the moment I knew I wasn't dealing with neighbors, I was dealing with amateurs. My name's Travis Holt. I'm 52, retired mechanical engineer, and I live in a lakefront cabin in rural Texas that's been in my family since before HOA even meant anything out here. My grandfather built this place after the war, back when folks respected fence lines and drank coffee before sunrise. I inherited it after my dad passed, and now it's just me, a lazy yellow lab named Duke, and about 3 acres of peace. Or it was, before they showed up. Lakeview Estates. That's what they called the row of overpriced houses the developers crammed up on the ridge last year. Bunch of prefab monstrosities with names like the Aspen and the Magnolia. It wasn't long before the gated entrance went up, followed by the inevitable HOA. And sitting right at the top of the power chain? Karen Whitmore. I swear that woman's voice has the same effect on me as stepping barefoot on a 3-pronged plug. She's exactly what you'd expect. A former interior designer from Orange County who drives a white SUV longer than my boat trailer and thinks Texas rustic means pre-distressed wood from Restoration Hardware. She introduced herself by walking up to my dock, uninvited of course, and saying, "Your structure kind of ruins the community's view." I laughed. Thought she was kidding. Spoiler, she wasn't. The first time they sent security was a Saturday. 2 guys in navy blue polos, matching walkies and clipboards. Not law enforcement. Not even code enforcement. Just HOA rent-a-cops acting like the FBI had sent them down to deal with a domestic threat named Travis Holt. "Sir," one of them said, "we've received reports of unauthorized gatherings on this property." I blinked. "You mean the barbecue I had with my dog and a trout?" They didn't smile. Apparently, my porch lighting was disruptive to the visual harmony of the lakefront. My dock? Unlicensed water structure. My rain barrels? Potential breeding ground for pests. Every weekend it got worse. They'd show up like clockwork, stomping around with flashlights, scribbling things on clipboards, mumbling about visual pollution and excessive occupancy. Then one night I heard them outside my window. Flashlights flickering across the cabin like some half-baked alien abduction scene. I stepped onto the porch in my boots and boxer shorts. "Something I can help you with, gentlemen?" I asked. They didn't flinch. One even had the nerve to say, "Just doing our rounds. It's HOA policy." I pointed toward the ridge. "So is staying off land that isn't yours. This property isn't in your HOA. Never was, never will be." They exchanged smirks. One tapped his radio. "You can contest it at the next HOA meeting, if you're a resident." That's when I realized they didn't care what was legal. They just assumed I wouldn't push back. They were wrong. The following Monday, I went to inspect my water line. There's a pipe that runs runoff from the lake into my small irrigation trench, helps keep the orchard moist during dry weeks. But something was off. The marker stake, orange PVC with a metal tag showing my grandfather's claim number, was missing. The ground had fresh paint streaks. I hiked back up to the old oak near the gate where I keep a trail cam, mostly to catch deer, maybe the occasional nosy neighbor. Popped the SD card and plugged it into my laptop. There she was. Karen, in yoga pants and a neon jacket, walking beside a man in a county utilities vest. They paused by the pipe. She gestured. He nodded. Then she bent down, shook a can of spray paint, and covered the marker entirely. My hand clenched the mouse so hard the plastic creaked. I knew 2 things right then. 1, Karen didn't just think she owned the lake. She thought she could rewrite history with a can of paint and a fake clipboard. 2, she had just made the dumbest move of her HOA career. Because I may be retired, but I still remember how to read plat maps, survey boundary lines, and build a case with evidence that doesn't scream or swing fists, but wins. I closed the laptop. Stood up. Walked to the corner of the room where the old blueprint tubes stood like sentries. Unrolled one labeled, "Lakefront Utility Overlay, 1972 Water Rights Filing, Holt." The ink was faded. But the truth was permanent. They wanted a war? Fine. But it wasn't going to be fought with meetings and memos. It was going to be fought with documents, drones, and damn good timing. I don't get mad. I get deeds, maps, and county registrars. Karen didn't realize I used to design water infrastructure for a living. That spray-painted pipe? It might as well have been a signed confession. The morning after I found the trail cam footage, I pulled on my boots, walked straight to the runoff pipe and scrubbed it clean. Took 5 minutes and a stiff wire brush. There it was, my grandfather's welded tag clear as ever, Holt 1972. I pulled out the folder. Every survey, every deed, Every permit since the Nixon administration. My cabin sat squarely outside the HOA boundary. The pipe. Covered by a sovereign access easement recorded on microfilm back when you still needed a librarian's gloves to touch official records. But the HOA? They had other plans. Later that afternoon, I found 2 fluorescent yellow citations zip-tied to my front gate. One read, "Unauthorized gate structure. Remove within 72 hours." The other said, "Unpermitted shoreline alteration. Subject to fine." They used Comic Sans, by the way. Truly criminal. I stood there with Duke sitting at my feet, both of us staring at these laminated pieces of passive-aggressive nonsense like they were alien artifacts. "Looks like they're doubling down, boy." He just yawned. That night I set up my old drafting table. Laid out blueprints, plat maps, land surveys, some going back over 50 years. Then I called Lyle Martinez. Lyle and I go back to the county planning days. He was a land appraiser with a sense of humor and a Rolodex that could find the burial site of a 1920s outhouse permit if needed. He retired 3 years ago to sell honey from his backyard beehives. Still sharp as a tack. "Tell me this isn't about Karen Whitmore," he said before I even finished explaining. "Oh, it's very much about Karen Whitmore." He laughed for a good 30 seconds. "I'll bring the old plot scanner." By the next morning Lyle and I were hunched over the picnic table on my porch, plat maps rolled out, coffee steaming in tin mugs. "See this?" He jabbed a pen at a shaded triangle on the HOA's filed map. "They claim this buffer zone, right? But this," he pointed to the original county overlay, "is county land. Not HOA. They built a fence through it. That's an encroachment. And this easement?" I tapped my grandfather's lake access path. "Filed under your name. Permanent. Irrevocable. They mess with it again, we've got them on interference with a legal utility." It was beautiful. A bureaucratic symphony of screw you. But it got better. That afternoon, my niece Casey rolled into the driveway in her rusted Honda Civic with a back seat full of legal textbooks and a GoPro taped to her dash. Casey is 23, in her 3rd year of law school, with the sharpness of a chainsaw and none of the patience. When I told her what happened, she grinned like someone just gave her the final exam ahead of schedule. "We're making this a mock trial project. Your land, their fraud. I get an A, you get your water. Deal?" "Deal." By sundown, she had a whiteboard set up in my living room with boxes labeled evidence, easements, and HOA lies. We scanned everything, photos, footage, land filings, and created a digital folder titled Karen Canty Swim. Then came the drone. Casey had picked it up off eBay for a media law elective, and within 20 minutes of flying it over the ridge, she shouted from the porch, "Uncle Trav, you are not gonna believe what they're doing." I joined her and stared at the screen. The HOA's landscaping team, 2 guys in orange vests and cargo shorts, were digging a shallow trench behind the back row of homes. It ran right up to the edge of the HOA's bluff line, and pointed straight toward the lake. "They're trying to redirect runoff," I said flatly. "They're draining the lake." "Toward their lawns," Casey added, zooming in. "Look at the pipe ends. Custom irrigation heads. Someone's diverting water from the public lake into private use." I stared at the screen. It was textbook environmental code violation. "They're building a covert irrigation system, through county land. And your property sits in the middle," Casey said. "So if that trench crosses it, it's felony-level trespass." I took a breath slowly. They had turned a water dispute into sabotage. And they did it right in front of my niece's drone camera. Karen might have had her HOA board, her clipboard, and her little band of rent-a-cops. But I had deeds, maps, and county registrars. And now I had footage. That night, we backed everything up to 3 drives, emailed it to Lyle for safekeeping, and saved a copy to a private cloud link. Then I poured a double bourbon, stepped onto the porch, and looked out at the lake. They wanted a war? Fine. But they just gave me artillery. They cut my water line, so I redirected the lake. They thought I wouldn't notice them trenching near my cabin. I noticed. I also own a bulldozer. By sunrise the next morning, I was 2 cups of coffee deep, sketching out a gravity-fed water reroute system with the help of a notepad, a wrench, and 35 years of engineering experience. I wasn't just going to get even, I was going to get documented. First things first, cameras. I installed 3 more trail cams, plus a weatherproof GoPro in an old owl box pointed directly at the slope where HOA's irrigation trench had become a lovely little illegal stream. For good measure, I zip-tied a solar panel to the back so I wouldn't miss a single drop of misconduct. Then I filed a quiet little injunction with the county water board, emergency stop work order for suspected illegal redirection of a public water source. Didn't make a peep to the HO. Let them keep digging. Meanwhile, I got to work on a new backup water system. Rain traps rigged to tin roofs, a gravel filtration basin down near the garden, and a solar-powered pump feeding into a pair of converted livestock tanks. Duke supervised. He especially liked the part where we tested the rain diverters using my hose. Casey was on legal detail. She updated the original 1972 easement filing with modern GPS coordinates and flagged the HOA's trenching project as a potential violation of the Clean Water Act. Her cease and desist letter? A masterpiece of polite annihilation. My personal favorite line: your continued encroachment may result in significant financial and criminal exposure. Translation: keep trenching, Karen. I dare you. We handed the paperwork to Lyle, who marched it down to the registrar's office himself, wearing his Vietnam vet hat and a BOLO tie, like a bureaucratic sledgehammer. He even convinced the clerk to mark it priority environmental and fast-track a formal inspection request. Then the fun really started. An email leaked. Specifically, a blast from Karen to the HOA residents that said, and I quote, "Travis Holt is hoarding water with illegal tanks and causing Lakeview's landscape failure. His selfishness is why your lawn looks dead." That gem made it into the community Facebook group, where it sparked a wildfire of complaints. Wait, he has water and we don't? I thought the lake was public? Why are my sprinklers brown and his grass looks like Wimbledon? The mob was turning. Slowly but surely. Then came the county inspector. They showed up on a Tuesday in a white pickup and khakis, clipboard, measuring wheel, water test kit. I offered coffee. He took one sip, pointed to the trench and said, "That's not supposed to be there." He took samples of runoff water pooling near a HOA home's French drain and found traces of fertilizer and sediment contamination. Illegal drainage confirmed. He snapped photos, shook my hand and said, "Expect fines." Karen didn't. 2 days later, she staged a press conference. Now, I know what you're thinking. What kind of HOA president calls a press conference? The kind who parks a folding podium in front of the Lakeview Estates sign and invites 3 local reporters and a news intern who probably thought this was about a bake sale. "I have been harassed," she said, fake crying like a high school theater student. "I'm being targeted by a neighbor using illegal surveillance and false legal filings to undermine our community's harmony." Harmony. That was rich coming from someone who hired 2 rent-a-cops to shine flashlights in my windows. But I didn't interrupt. I didn't shout. I didn't even watch it live. Because that night I published a little video of my own. Title: When the HOA Breaks the Law, Watch What Happens. It opened with Casey's drone footage of the trench, zoomed in on the pipe heads, overlaid with timestamps. Then came the night cam footage of Karen herself, walking with a county official and defacing the waterline marker. Cut to HOA rent-a-cops trying to explain visual pollution. Cut to aerial time-lapse of the lake water being funneled into private lawns during a county-imposed drought restriction. And then the closer, me standing on my porch with Duke at my feet simply saying, "They accused me of hoarding water. I just made sure it didn't get stolen." The video racked up 12,000 views overnight. A community watchdog group shared it. A local environmental attorney DM'd Casey and offered free litigation support. My inbox? Flooded with messages like, "Get him, cowboy," and "This is how you fight HOA tyranny." By Friday, Karen's inbox wasn't looking so good. Because I filed a lawsuit. 4 counts. Environmental sabotage. Trespassing. Harassment. Drainage manipulation. We named Karen and the HOA as co-defendants. And because I was in no rush, we filed it in the same week the county issued their citations and the water board began investigating HOA misuse of public resources. Back on my porch that night, I watched the lake glisten under the moonlight. They wanted water? They could wade through the consequences. They paid $50,000 to learn they don't own the lake. The court wasn't even the worst part for them. No, the real sting came when Karen's loyal HOA crowd watched my drone footage on the news, frames showing their own kids splashing around in contaminated runoff from that illegal trench she had dug right behind their pristine backyards. Poetic? Sure. Preventable? Absolutely. But they didn't want warnings, they wanted a war. And wars come with casualties. When court day arrived, I wore my cleanest pair of jeans and a be-on-the-lookout tie shaped like the state of Texas. Casey, meanwhile, strutted in like she was born for this, sleek black suit, folders in one hand, iced coffee in the other, and a smirk that said, "I already know we've won." Across from us sat the HOA's legal rep, some sharp-tongued junior partner from a local firm that probably handled traffic tickets and the occasional divorce. He looked confident, until the judge asked for the property maps. That's when Casey stepped forward and dropped a 3-foot-wide laminated plat map onto the table like it was a murder weapon. "Your Honor," she said sweetly, "this is the original survey, filed 1972, registered with County Deed Office. Note the boundaries. The lake, the cabin, the private easement, and this." She pointed at a colored overlay. "This is the trench cut across our client's easement without permission or permit." The HOA's lawyer started fumbling with papers, muttering something about shared responsibility and ambiguous ownership. Casey didn't even blink. "Your Honor, their HOA isn't even on the title for the disputed area. Not 1 square foot." Then came the footage. I took the stand and played the videos. HOA security trespassing, Karen spray painting the marker, the trench, the diverted flow, and the lake's drop measured week by week on a hand-painted depth post I'd made during the drought. I finished with this: "They didn't just harass me, they stole from the lake and they poisoned their own soil doing it." The courtroom was dead quiet. Then the judge looked down at the filings, back up at the lawyer, and said in a tone I'll remember forever, $50,000 in penalties and damages, effective immediately. Mr. Holt, your rights are upheld. HOA to cease all access attempts and pay all court costs. Bang. Gavel. Done. Karen? She didn't even look at me when she left the room. Too busy trying to avoid the camera from Channel 9 parked outside the courthouse. I wasn't done though, not with the money and not with the message. See, I didn't fight this for a payout. I fought it because some things still matter in this world: property, peace, legacy. So I took $5,000 of that money and installed a floating dock on the public side of the lake. Built it myself just like Grandpa Holt taught me. Even carved a little inscription on the handrail: "For anyone who wants to fish in peace." A few weeks later, a couple of kids from Lakeview Estates rode up on bikes. I was sitting on the dock with Duke, sipping sweet tea. The taller one hesitated. "Mr. Holt? My mom says we shouldn't bother you, but..." I smiled. "But you want to fish?" He nodded. I tossed them a spare rod. They didn't care about HOA politics. They just wanted water, fish, and maybe a few quiet hours away from grown-up noise. Word got out. More kids came by. Some parents too. We trade stories. Sometimes I'd show them how to rig a line or tell them about the time my granddad caught a catfish bigger than the cooler it was stuffed in. Meanwhile, Karen resigned from the HOA for personal reasons. Residents filed their own lawsuits after learning she'd redirected dues toward security enhancements and landscape beautification that conveniently benefited her own property line. The HOA meetings? They got quieter. A new board was formed, one that actually read bylaws before acting. Someone even knocked on my door one day with an apology and banana bread. Lal got a kick out of it all. Said it was the best civic drama he'd seen since the time someone sued the county over a turkey crossing sign. As for Casey, she turned this whole thing into her final law school thesis. Got published in a journal for her legal strategy around property easements and small claims environmental law. "Uncle Trav," she told me, holding up her diploma later that year, "you were the weirdest, most stubborn client I've ever had." I just grinned. And the most right. We laughed for a long time. Eventually, I put up a wooden sign at the cabin's entrance. Simple, carved with care. Holt Lake Cabin, St. 1972, still standing. That's the thing about land. Remembers? It outlasts fences, fine print, and power-hungry people with too much free time. They tried to control the view. But I reminded them. The land remembers who truly belongs here. They built fences. I built peace. And now, the lake flows where it always wanted to. Speech balloon, if this story touched your heart like it did mine, tell me, have you ever had to fight for something that should have already been yours? Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. Pushpin, and if you believe in standing up quietly but powerfully, hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories that remind us what strength really looks like. Sparkling Heart, your support helps us keep these voices alive.